Founder fortunately has pneumonia, so he can't able to join us this evening. But we're really excited to start this event with really great thanks to Lisa Dance Theater for helping host this, and should be a great evening. For those of you that aren't familiar with the Young Luxury Marketers Council, we were founded in June of last year, and the premise is fairly simple. It's to bring the smartest, brightest young marketers aged 25 to 39 together, explore best practices, trends in the marketplace, and specifically pertaining to millennials and affluent millennials. Tonight we are joined by a very wonderful panel who will be showcasing in just a little bit, but first we're going to have a quick video. So Suzanne Konowitz is for the Executive Director of Lisa Dance Theater is going to come up and say a few words, and then Jacqueline Bulisi is going to say something about the video.
Again, thank you so much for coming tonight. Really appreciate it, and I want to thank the Young Luxury Marketing Council, Josh and Chris for hosting this with us. I'm the Executive Director of the company. The company, it's a momentous season. We're celebrating our 20th year, which is quite an accomplishment, in this field. The company was founded by 4 principal dancers of the Martha Graham Dance Company, quickly catapulted to acclaim, and has been performing since at the Joyce Theater, which is the leading theater of contemporary dance in New York. In fact, the Joyce will be expanding down with a 2,000-seat theater at Ground Zero in a few years. The company tours worldwide. In fact, we just initiated a new strategy of reaching people globally through live stream. And one of the most amazing accomplishments that we've achieved this year was the Table of Silence project at Lincoln Center, which had 120 dancers in tribute to the anniversary of September 11th, live streamed to 25 countries around the world. I would like to introduce you to Jacqueline Bulisi, Artistic Director. Before I do that, we have 2 of our dancers in the back, So Young An and Jason Jordan, who are the faces on the postcards that you have. And we do hope to see you at the Joyce, and when we're done, I will introduce you to Shannon Smith, who is the chair of our Millennials Committee. Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to thank you, Josh, and the Young Luxury Marketing Council for coming out this evening. The film that you're going to see is a kind of exploration, and also it explains through the eyes of the people who participated in the creation of a work, Suspended Women, in 1998. I created this work with 12 women and 4 men, and it was inspired by, I guess, years of study and just my feeling about women throughout time, suspended in time, that the many steps that we take forward in our lives, we go forward, we're still going back, and we go forward and we're still going one back. So today you can walk on the street and you can see a woman walking in a burqa out of biblical times, and you can see a woman, walking in a bathing suit. It's that diverse. You can go and be in France, and there's billboards with women who are half naked, and yet you go to another part of the world and you cannot go anywhere unless you have long sleeves on. So there's that aspect of it. Also, Suspended Women it takes me into a place that's called the liminal space. And the liminal space is between here and there. That space that as you step over the threshold, that space is the liminal space. And we all get caught, and that's the suspended space. So it's like you go in your life walking, and then all of a sudden, as you take this next step, you're kind of like feeling as if the earth is falling under you or whatever, until you step through that window, through that door, into, I would say, the next realm, the next, it's a transformation. And so in this work, the women play different women throughout time. It's episodic. They come together. They form different scenes like in a play. And this good friend of mine, Lawrence Scott, approached me and he said, I'd like to do a docudrama of suspended women and interview the women who originally were in the ballet. So did I talk too much?
No, perfect time.
So that's what you're going to see here. I think it's about 15, 20 minutes, is it, Susan?
It's about 20 minutes.
It's about
And
15,
it's-
20
yeah.
minutes. And so I hope you will enjoy seeing the process. So I'm talking about process. But behind every process that we do in dance, there's always a journey, and there's layers and layers of what makes a dance. The same way there's layers and layers that make an orchestra, or that a painter uses when he paints the canvas. And so we go through the sketch, and then the sketch becomes more and more and more and more until, like a seed or like a mandala. You know, if you've ever drawn a mandala, you take that seed and then it branches out, and then you draw another symbol and it branches out, and all of a sudden it blossoms. So I think that actually, if we're ready,
Yep.
it would probably be great to go through that, and then maybe at the end I can answer some questions.
Great.
Sharon?
Just got it.
Yeah.
So what you will see here tonight is a coming together of the artists that were involved in the initial making of Suspended Women and creating the work, and talking about the process of creating the work.
When I look back on that whole process of making Suspended Women, I have hundreds and hundreds of impressions. It's all visual, musical, theatrical sensations. Like, I went through all these different ideas of who were the men, who was I in this, and then for me, I hit upon this thing that worked for me, that I was like a blank screen, and anyone watching it could project on me and what I was doing, whatever their image of man was in this context. And because it was about the women, it was about their relationships to men. It wasn't about our relationship to them. It was about their relationship to us.
Jacqueline had created this very sculptural dance, and you're flying onto the floor, and you're standing up, and you're crashing, and you can't do that without the petticoat or without the garment to begin to time it out. And what's so very beautiful about the piece is the fabric flying in the air, and how the girls work with it, and how the boys work with it. And in the final moment with the jackets and all of that, you must have the garments there to really evolve that movement. There are real whole dresses, there are fractured dresses, there are dresses with corsets, but in most cases things have been fractured. So you see a lot of the undergarments. In fact, all this upside down and flying over shoulders, you see them and you want to see them, but you have to incorporate that now into the whole picture very carefully. I think all of the creations that I've worked on with Jackie are organic in the way they evolve. It's not just a sketch and you make a dress and the person makes the dress work. It starts in a much more organic way. As I call it, dancing with bed sheets on. As a child, we used to pin bed sheets on and race around the room and make shapes and all of that. And that's an organic way of working.
What I usually do is I make a script, and I do that for Suspended Women in this case as well. And I just draw out the choreography so that I can understand where we are in the dance at any given point. And then usually I do that on the left-hand side of the paper, and on the right-hand side I describe what the lighting is at any moment. For me, the color thing is the hardest thing to talk about because it's almost, I would say, it's subconscious. And in a way, I just feel it, and it comes. One idea of color will come, and then I can fill out the rest of the palette based on that one idea. And definitely in this piece, I mean, I use pink light, which is even funny to say, just because it seems so cliche or something. But I think one of the reasons it works is because it's unique in the repertoire of this company. This is the only piece that has that kind of color palette. And I can start out with one idea, like those projections. And those projections they're different pieces of colored glass. And then when the light comes through it, it refracts in kind of interesting and unpredictable ways, because it's all different little shards. I think absolutely that the idea of shards is connected to Suspended Women as a piece. That I wanted this idea of movement, like that the floor was not solid underneath these women. I remember thinking that it should be like a landscape that is not easily navigable, and that was shifting all the time. And that's the world that these women had to kind of get through.
I wanted to find impulses for vital theatrical expression, to integrate my own movement language, which had been informed by tradition and history, and bring feelings, emotions, images, sounds into an organic expression, and to be able to bring out from the dancers their own voices. So I had to create a playing field for them that would allow them to be individual characters. Had to be a creation of a space so that there could be a transformation of the movement, so that the movement language would tell the story of these women, these archetypes. And the only way to become one is to go so deep into understanding the music. And you have to understand the music so that you can hear between the notes. So details become incredibly important. They had to be able to sustain themselves together, even between the notes as they moved. And the movements became like kaleidoscopic kind of energies, moving in movement fragments that move together like the shards in the lighting that Clifton understood then in seeing the work. I wanted this kind of suspended physicality, and it takes a tremendous amount of strength to suspend a movement into the air. And we worked a great deal on that. So it wasn't just falling into the floor, it was suspending and sustaining that suspension through the muscle viscerally, and then suddenly being able to have the earth rise up into your heart.
My reflections from the first time I saw Suspended Women are still pretty vivid after 7 years. I can remember my amazement at the costumes and my amazement at the intensity of the performers, and there were so many of them who had that kind of theatrical concentration that you never forget. And there's something about the suspendedness and the beautiful, decadent, late modern ripeness of Ravel's music, and the impulses from within the dancers' bodies that were animating the space and animating their costumes. It felt so full of depth.
Beginning a work like Suspended Women, Jacqueline comes in with books and papers and images and fabric and not necessarily steps. Steps are not important, at least in the beginning they are not important. The most important thing is that each individual in the room has the capacity to try to read into what Jacqueline's idea of the whole piece is, but most importantly, in order for her to be able to find that, to really look into yourself, to work and to inhabit this character that she sees in you.
There is a part in the piece when Rika runs and just falls, and we all rushed around her just to look at her for a moment, and we are suspended just over her, and then we move back, we shift back, and life keeps going. And actually, I think of that image many times. In life, I mean, we see this image all the time, we see it in the news. What I remember the most about Suspended Woman, it's many, many things actually. I don't think it can be one. It's the spirit of woman, feeling that you are a part of a whole, of layers and layers and layers of generations. So there is a lot of memories like that I have about the piece, about going through each other, crossing each other, turning, looking at each other, going closer to each other. Feeling a relationship with all those characters in the piece. Having women of all levels of experience performing at the same time was incredibly freeing, because you never felt frightened to take a risk. Any choice that you made, any place that you wanted your character to go, she could go there.
To mind immediately is that sense of community of a group of women, and being in the studio with such a cross section of women and such a variety of different personalities and backgrounds, different ages, is extremely exciting all by itself.
during the creation of Suspended Women. My hair was really crazy that day, and I remember her saying that I looked like I needed to go to the insane asylum. And that day, the girl in the hoop skirt got a new movement, which was really this like walking on a tightrope, walking, sort of waving my arms, really walking on the edge of time.
Often after the interpolations, there were these natural images like waves. And to me, the wave was almost this cathartic moment that would wash over whatever had occurred previously. And it would relate a lot to the concept of women being suspended in time or timelessness.
And the men sort of create in the piece a tension within almost a serene, suspended woman place. And we kind of come in and shake it up.
I always thought of the men not as the male figure necessarily, but as a driving force of life. The whirlwind that the figure of the male in this piece brings by being able to execute, movement with the female in this unbelievably powerful way.
Well, Jackie approached me at the Juilliard School. She was creating a new work for her company, and she was using the Ravel Piano Concerto in G major, and that she wanted to add sections within the midst of the music. A musical interpolation is the insertion of extra musical devices or moments, if you will, to extend or even change a musical piece. I think we decided early on that it would be the musical instrumentation would be for piano and violin, and how that would work out exactly, I think that was one of the early discussions. Would I play violin? Would I play piano? Eventually I ended up playing both instruments, and through modern technology was able to record both parts and play and ultimately for the live performances, play only the violin. I think the interpolations serve an important function in not only the theatrical moment in the piece. Think of a Sturm and Drang. To me, what I could see, this was one of the more tenuous moments in the work, and the interpolation of the music reflects that in the music. The music is very tense, agitated, biting, riveting, if you will.
I realized, okay, all these women are pretty much individual. Even we are dancing in unison, same movement, but Jackie's always saying like, you have to find something in it. And I'm like, okay. I always remember that word. It's okay, let me see, who am I? And I think about a few weeks in the rehearsal, I started to decide who am I. I actually do have a name of person, but until the costume came and I really realized Jacqueline actually saw me in that person. That's why she made that costume.
The character that Jackie helped me create actually, the woman in the white dress who's innocent and vulnerable and supplicant. At the same time, she walks this very fine line of her supplication, running her into extremely dangerous territory.
How do you distill in a few words what is something that comes from the well, the spring well of creative energy, a creative force that's inside of you? Is always very, very difficult. And I think that in a way you don't want to take the poem and to explain it and to analyze it too deeply, because there is a certain amount of the divine, of something that we cannot quite really define.
without further ado, we're going to start the panel discussion. So I don't know if the panelists want to come up and do a quick introduction on each of the panelists. All right. First panelist obviously is Jacqueline Buglisi, and I don't know if you want to say a few words on the history of the theater, or if you want to continue on the.
I think it said it all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second panelist is Caleb Custer, founder of Gray Ship. So Caleb.
Hey, I'm Caleb Custer. I am the founder of Gray Ship. We're a small digital agency that specializes in performing arts companies. So before that, I was the director of marketing at Cedar Lake Contemporary Ballet in Chelsea. So I spent 4 or 5 years there. I've worked for several other digital and creative agencies in the city, also worked on some Broadway agencies, and just recently struck out on my own. So.
Okay. Next we have Todd Rosen, Managing Director of National Corporate Theater Fund.
Hello, thank you. Todd Rosen, National Corporate Theater Fund. We're an association of 20 large not-for-profit theaters around the country. We represent 20, and we're headquartered here in New York. And we deal with media projects, philanthropy, sponsorships on behalf of these 20 theaters. And recently we launched a program to secure their arts education programs called Impact Creativity. You may see it, we're in the back of taxis around New York now and in some billboards with the message, theater education changes lives. And hopes to affect 500,000 kids, mostly disadvantaged from around the country.
All right, and last but not least, Terry Bonner, Manager of National Underwriting for WQXR.
So I'm Terry Bonner. So I manage all the national integrated media sponsorships and underwriting, basically for WQXR and WNYC and all of New York Public Radio. Primarily I work a lot of our national programs on WNYC. But locally with WQXR, I work on a lot of our different events in the green space and stuff like that. In my background, I've worked in radio probably for the last 7 years, and also just in the music industry, working with a lot of different music seminars and also with a lot of other bands. So I've kind of worked a lot of different genres just in the music scene and in the arts.
Great. All right. Well, I have a few questions. First, we're going to start is kind of defining the demographic. Kind of a comparison between millennials and the boomers. What do you see as their spending habits, and how the spending habits different from one generation to the other? If anyone in particular wants to take that question to start.
Well, I guess I'll start. I was reading an interesting fact today about millennials that 70% of them during the past year have actually fundraised for a charity. I thought that was an interesting fact. You know, whether they're doing a walkathon or sharing something violent, you know, on the internet, and 75% have given personally to a charity in the past year. I thought that was interesting because, you know, we look at our audiences in the theater, and typically, not always, but typically, and of course, looking at a lot of our theaters around the country, the audience tends to skew older. And the demographic there, you know, women buy the majority of the tickets, we find. And also, as far as luxury spending, we find that theater audiences are more likely to buy financial products than golf and tennis fans. So that shows you right there that theater audiences tend to skew high on the luxury scale. But the opportunity, of course, being millennials.
Well, okay, so I think that's an interesting point. I mean, the general kind of concept of millennials, right, is that they don't participate in the kind of traditional donor system of, like, you know, moving up a patron level from a $50 donation to a $100 donation to, you know, eventually giving $5,000 a year. Like, we don't see that kind of participation. But it's interesting that you note that they do participate in giving, but maybe just not in the same kind of more structured way that we're looking at. And I think there's a lot to be said for that. I mean, there's a lot to be said for the kind of Kickstarter idea. Like, does that... I don't think the idea of giving is fundamentally different, but the way in which it's framed and the way in which I participate in that is much more open to my lifestyle. I mean, to giving in small amounts, to giving towards something where I can see on a graph that we're getting somewhere, giving in a way that's social,
Right.
which are all ways that are different from the kind of traditional donor cultivation system.
I think they also need a lot of motivation. I think the difference between, if you're going to talk about nonprofit and giving, the difference between a millennial and a boomer spender is that a millennial, it's about them, it's about themselves, and it's about cause. So they want to find one cause that they can really kind of align themselves to specifically, and that makes them stand out. And they always kind of want like some more of an incentive. That's why you're seeing a lot more of like these concerts and the whole thing with Sandy, and there's like this huge thing now at Madison Square Garden, and you have all these amazing artists. So it's kind of also a little bit of, what else am I gonna get from it? They're gonna want a concert, they're gonna want something that's gonna also entertain them, and it's just kind of a different way. So now all this money in ticket sales, that's kind of the way it's being donated, rather than, hey, I'm just gonna give a large sum.
Right.
Where I feel like boomers, it's a little bit more quiet, they have the extra money to actually just go ahead and kind of give, like with public radio, a lot of our donations from the older side, I guess, would really be, I mean, you see people putting them in their wills, or it becomes like, these big galas and different things like that. But from the younger sense, there's always entertainment involved, or there's a cause. It's all about themselves.
Jacqueline, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I agree with all that was said. I think the one thing I feel young people in general just blow my mind, that they are so much more aware of the environment, or they're very aware and want to be connected to those things that are socially conscious, and also about the nurturing of the earth. People going back and saying, I'm only going to eat things that are all green. I'm only going to, do things in my lifestyle that is also connected to not, continuing to have plastic or that kind of thing, or with the babies, we're not going to do plastic diapers. We're doing something that we feel is going almost a little bit more back to really respecting our natural world, which I think is quite beautiful, and we're returning to that.
And overall, I feel that there's an intensity to what they do, like you talked about, as far as a relation to the cause, or even we're talking today about the type of theater that millennials like to see. It tends to be very intense work, one way or the other, comedy or drama.
Well, I think especially in terms of spending, it's something where you can see the direct results, more closely. Where if I participate in a more structured donor process, my money goes in the general fund. It may be something that I see next year, or I see money in the program. Where if I donate to a Kickstarter fund, in 30 days, I know whether or not this was successful, and I hear directly from the artist. Again, it feels like a more intense experience, like more like, yes, this was worthwhile.
Right.
Yes, this is something I participated in, it was helpful. Rather than feeling like my money generally went towards supporting an artistic mission of an organization.
Yeah, great. And then I guess that's a good segue, to moving into more specific initiatives, maybe case studies of how each of your organizations have enticed the millennial demographic, not only through donation, but also through sales of tickets, bringing them in, exposing them to the arts.
There's a good example from Cedar Lake specifically. We ran a campaign, similar kind of a docudrama, but rather than running an entire drama, we ran 1 minute every week. So we filmed a single minute from the process and broke it down. So it was called Project 52. It was 1 year, 52 minutes every Monday. So we kind of like broke this into bite-sized chunks. Assuming that millennials are a generation that came out of Sesame Street and MTV, where things are kind of broken into very bite-sized chunks. So we saw a great response in terms of viewership there, in terms of participation online. We didn't really see that translate into ticket sales, but I believe the issue there was probably a geographical and kind of supply issue. The viewership was nationwide and global, whereas the company was really only performing in about 20 markets that year. So it was kind of diversified. But we consider that very successful in terms of actually engaging millennials. In terms of turning it into a ticket sale, that's actually kind of a different product.
Right.
WQXR, obviously, it's classical music, and classical music has kind of like the stigma that it's only an older audience, it's kind of boring, it's kind of what your grandparents were listening to, and it's actually not. There's actually a huge generation, a young generation that is really getting into classical music and is making classical music, but a lot of it's very influenced by a lot of different types of world music. So one thing, or a few things that WQXR has done, we've really been trying to like kind of change the image of classical music and make WQXR just look very cool and very hip to that younger millennial audience. But one thing that we've done, we've actually should talk to you about, is that we've launched like a digital, I guess, specific separate station off of QXR called Q2 Music, and it's only online. You can only stream it, but it's not just classical music, but again, it's aligning it with just, it's broadening it. It's more about world music, and it's a lot of younger artists coming together with older artists and a lot of different types of traditions. And the way Q2 Music is kind of like marketing themselves and taken over, one cool thing is that we've kind of claimed November as Beethoven Awareness Month. And the way we promoted it was, we got permission from Shepard Fairey, who's the graffiti artist who does all the Obey stuff, and we did Obey Beethoven, and that was our marketing campaign throughout the entire city. We did like tattoos and things like that. It was very cool. What we also did for Beethoven Month is, in our green space, is we brought in DJ Spooky, we brought in the Brooklyn Rider, which is like this young folk string band, and we had them completely do a remix of Beethoven. So it was kind of taking these old, traditional music and getting their perception on it, and how were they influenced by it, and just listening to DJ Spooky talk about when he was younger, like grabbing these different records and stuff like that, and just really aligning ourselves with stuff that we're doing at the MoMA. We're now doing the Ecstatic Music Festival. We're the only digital platform that's streaming all of this stuff. And that's all these young indie artists that you're going to see in Pitchfork and stuff like that coming together and using classical music and collaborating on a different level and bringing all their music together. And we're showcasing that. So it's just kind of, how can we change it and make it look cool again?
So really tapping into the whole aspect of globalization and kind of how, with obviously our generation, technology driven, the internet, being able to access, musicians in Africa or Asia, something that the boomer generation really never had the opportunity to. You've really seemed to tap into that, to that demographic, that world.
Yeah.
Exactly.
One of our theaters in Minneapolis, the Guthrie Theater, started tweet seats. So they're in the balcony, so they don't interrupt the rest of the audience, but it allows audience members to tweet during the show. So that's a totally different dynamic, and obviously more less anonymous and more participatory in the process.
Any other comments?
Yeah, actually, we have also used technology to reach out there globally by live streaming performance at Lincoln Center for 9/11, and it was really incredible, the response that we had to not only to the performance itself, but to the live streaming. That the following year, when we put it out on Facebook, we had 300 responses immediately of people who wanted to perform in the work. And the contract for the work was, you had to believe deeply in what you were doing, because there's no pay for it. You don't allow anyone to, there's no exchange of money for coming and being dedicated to this performance. And so, and then also the live streaming got much larger, and we also were able to monitor it, the matrix of knowing that it had reached 25 countries, had picked it up and turned it on. So that was pretty neat.
Yeah, I think I think if you go to any movie theater outside of the city or even in the city, you constantly see the Met Opera or Lincoln Center. You've always seen these advertisements for it, and it's interesting to hear that, because I've always sat at the theater and thought, I wonder who's actually coming to this. And it's interesting that you're using Facebook as well, obviously a millennial tool, to understand the metrics and who's actually coming to the table for that. So I guess another question that I have is, what are some of the challenges and hurdles of millennials that you face? We know that millennials have I don't want to say an issue, but have tendency not to just be involved with a company or a brand by a brand based on the heritage of it. They want to have a reason. They want to feel like the company or the theater or the arts is reaching out to them directly. But maybe give some examples of hurdles that you've faced.
Well, inherently, the performing arts, the audience member in many cases is sort of anonymous, like I said before, and we know millennials like to participate. Some of our theaters have done some more site-specific kind of work. The American Repertory Theater, one of our theaters on the campus of Harvard, did the Donkey Show, which is set in a nightclub, and they allow people to bring their smartphones into the performance and utilize them in the play. I was even thinking about the production of Once, which won the Tony Award this year, that's on Broadway. At intermission, you can go on the stage and you can be on the set and have a beer. Now, it's not a participatory show, but still that sort of breaks down the experience and makes it more engaging for the audience member in a lot of different ways. So those are some things that I've seen recently.
So have you found millennials to be reluctant, though, towards the arts at all? Have you seen that they might have a reluctance?
I disagree with what you're saying completely, actually. I think that a millennial audience actually has more of a connection to the arts and cultural, just everything right now. I mean, I think, like you said, the issue is that, they're not just going to sit there and stick with a heritage brand. But the thing, it's not a millennial thing. It's just the way life is now. I mean, there's just abundance of everything. There's all these things online. I mean, you have access to watching the ballet on like YouTube or whatever. So why necessarily just go and buy tickets? You need to be doing something to kind of just stand out and make yourself different, and that's going to actually connect with their specific lifestyle and really tell a story to them. I think that the millennial generation is a lot more educated. In younger generations, just a lot more educated than they've ever been, and they have more access to stuff around the world, that they're actually more interested in different cultures, and they want the access. They want that so badly to like hear classical music, but they want to hear it with like a different twist. But even like when it comes to hip hop and rock, they want hip hop to now stand out in a different way and see that merged with different type of music. They just want something that's different and that's going to really excite them. And it's how can you tell that story? How can you bring that to that specific person and make yourself stand out? So I mean, why would you attach yourself to something heritage if it's not doing anything for you? You're going to do something that's going to do something for you now and excite you now. So.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think you're necessarily seeing less participation or less interest in participating, but really a higher threshold for getting me to participate. Because I have so many other things I can be doing with my time. Like, I'm not going to trust you that just because you've done this before or you've been doing this for 30 years that it's probably good. I mean, if a friend tells me the show is really good, I can quickly check out online and see, like, actually, everybody on Twitter hates this. Or actually, the clips online look pretty lame. Like, I don't have to trust you that because you've been performing at Lincoln Center for 20 years now that you must actually be good. I mean, I can find out whether you are or not. And I think what you're saying is exactly right. Like, it has to be something that connects with me. It has to be something that requires more from the artist and more from the company in order to be kind of worthy of my attention in some way. Because if you're not, there are 20 other organizations or 20 other TV channels or films that will. So it's just a higher competition.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like there's so many decisions every night. I mean, there's so many different events in one night that I have to choose. Like, what am I going to do tonight? What am I going to... And it's, you need to stand out so that you're making that decision and that you're the chosen event or chosen whatever it is, I don't want to keep going to the same thing and seeing the same things. And grab my attention. Like, don't give me some long, from a marketing standpoint, don't give me this long advertisement on what it is. Don't give me like this whole like 15-minute presentation. Give me like a clip of it so that I'm excited and now I have to go see more.
Well, now millennials have short attention spans.
Totally do.
But do you see, please don't name any examples, but I assume you see a lot of theater companies, brands, artists, whatever it may be, that just, and we see this in retail with marketing as well, brands that don't have really no interest. I mean, like they say they do, but they don't do anything. They're not aggressive. They don't understand the millennial demographic. I'm sure you've come across that in your experience. Some brands are much more fine-tuned and understanding of the millennials as opposed to other brands who think we don't need them, which obviously is a pitfall.
said not to use
Yeah, I was
examples,
about
so
to
I
say,
didn't
I'm
know
not
how to
sure.
respond to that.
What?
But I guess one way I could
Yeah.
do it that's not an example of a brand, but just because I work at a classical radio station, is the difference between our classical radio station to a lot of the stations in other markets. Like I said, we have a whole millennial team backing us up, so everything we're doing is just already coming from that mindset and doing all these different viral stuff, or like I said, working with Shepherd Ferry to do our marketing, and having DJ Spooky to do a remix. I'm sure a classical radio station in like Cincinnati or something, it's playing the same old stale classical music list, and it's just, they're not really going to stand out. But I don't think they care to have a different audience. I don't think there's a competition for that.
Yeah, but eventually,
But
obviously,
being in New York, we have that.
you know, eventually boomers will, I don't want to say fade into the past, and millennials will come to present, and they obviously have to at some point.
But
You know,
I think boomers and millennials, I think we all want the same thing now. I think a lot of boomers are learning from the millennials, and they're changing their habits. And the things that they want to see, I think they're looking for more too, and they're kind of going to younger events than they ever did, because I mean, it's just a different lifestyle. They're living longer. They want to live their life to the fullest, and they want to learn from, you know, their children.
Yeah, I think the point you're making there is that some of the changes we're talking about are just changes in the culture in general. They're not specific to, we're not saying like, oh, well, it's only millennials who enjoy this and everybody else doesn't enjoy that. But we're saying like, this is actually a change that we as an entire culture participate in, and that it's not only due to that.
But I think that's the way we need to look at it.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
not a demographic anymore. It's just,
Yeah,
it's
I
a
agree.
people.
I mean, because there are some examples, you know, successfully of segmenting things, you know, of creating a young patrons group or of kind of separating that. I mean, I know that's something you guys are working with. It's going well, but I think more of it has to do with not trying to segment that out, but understanding that maybe it's kind of a larger shift. Like, you know, it's probably not only millennials who are going to want to use your website, you know, on a mobile phone. It's actually everybody who's going to want to do
Well,
that.
segmentation of demographics only started once TV was launched. And it was like a new way that Nielsen kind of came along and decided we have to categorize all these different type of people to start marketing to them. And but we're in a totally different world. It's not just TV. We're watching TV online now, but we're also watching all these other things. So it really has to be more about a lifestyle and just of people than necessarily demographic.
Todd, do you have anything to add to that, or?
Well, I'll have Caleb help me on this, but I'll talk about the Broadway industry since I work mostly for not-for-profit, but that's one industry that's been very slow. You know, even just the union issues of being able to show clips of actors and putting on YouTube has been a huge problem for them, and that's starting to ease up now with new labor agreements. But you know, Broadway's been really slow with that, and you know, customer service in that arena is another issue. You know, if you've been to a Broadway show, I mean, besides the fact that your seat is about this big and there's no one to sort of help or guide you through, you know, any customer service issues, but
Yeah, I mean, it's a very old world industry.
very much so.
A lot of the ticketing is still, I mean, not only paper, but I mean, a lot of it is you're printing out all the tickets ahead of time and handing them out individually to people.
Right.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of an arcane system. But yeah, I think that's a great example of, that's not just something that millennials would prefer change, that's something we would all prefer change.
Right.
Like, you know, doing, you know, e-ticketing or doing some kind of, you know, digital ticketing is not only something that would appeal to millennials, but something that, you know, we as a culture should participate in.
Definitely.
Even though it seems to maybe be more driven by a younger demographic.
And I think that's actually a really good segue, because you've brought up e-commerce and Facebook and a few times, and I know you guys were talking about, you know, it's not just millennials, but you know, what other, I mean, as you said a few already, but what other big shifts have happened that kind of are driving millennial spending? You know, you mentioned Facebook, for example. We always hear about F-commerce. I mean, has that been something that has been beneficial for millennials? I know that, for example, we did an event a while back with Tory Burch, and they said that F-commerce is actually working for them, which is interesting for a retail brand. But maybe elaborate a little bit on any of that, or maybe other shifts.
Yeah, I mean, performing arts has a particular trouble with that because, I mean, all of this ends up having to funnel through a ticketing system at some point, which very seldom plays well with Facebook. I've not seen very many companies connect well on that level. In terms of reaching the demographic, yeah, that's done really well, but haven't seen a whole lot of sales driven through that. I mean, that just tends to be a sticking point in general.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys have had
Yeah.
different experience, hopefully.
Or not even just with Facebook, but just any, you know, I mean, obviously online sales, I mean, that's just a natural thing nowadays. But, you know, maybe anything else, something that is not obvious to the, you know.
Well, no, I mean, this is actually, no, I think that is a fairly good example. So, I mean, I work in advertising, so a lot of times you're looking at this conversion funnel, you're looking at, you know, the various means that, you know, anyone has participated with the brand, you know, getting them all the way to this purchase step. And you look at this kind of a huge drop-off that usually hits right about, you know, on a ticketing sign-up page or whatever. And I think performing arts in general probably has one of the most arduous processing, you know, like final processing interfaces compared to purchasing pretty much any other product. And I think that's something that hugely affects millennials because, I mean, not only like is it a pain like when you're on your phone and you can't actually purchase the ticket because there's all this zooming and scrolling, but I think that it kind of signals to you like you don't really get how this works, right? Like you as an organization, I don't think you really understand, like I just want to purchase this and go on, but I don't really want to have to fill out an entire form. Like I don't have to fill out a huge form when I purchase anything else, any of the other parts of my lifestyle. So I think not only is it frustrating in that single experience, but I think it kind of turns you off to the art form in general in saying like, I'm not really sure you kind of get the lifestyle that I live in. I don't know if you guys have a similar experience with that, but I feel like that's something that I see a lot with my clients just in terms of kind of getting right to that purchase screen and then not finishing because there's a lot of ticketing issues.
I don't really work a lot with just our ticket sales for our events, so I mean that's not.
Good for you.
Yeah, that's not really.
No, but I don't have a lot to add to that, but
Okay.
I absolutely agree.
But
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. I think that it's really hard because we're carrying our computer, we're carrying all of this information with us in our hand, and we want it to be agile, easy, and it is very hard because the font is still this very tiny, you know. And I have to confess, I have found myself saying, "Oh, forget it, we're going somewhere else," you know, because it's just too much of a big deal
That's
to
one of
actually purchase the ticket.
It's one of the appeals of Amazon. Is
Sure.
the ease of use, and that's
Yeah.
obviously a recurring trend. Well, I think in the interest of time, we'd like to move on to some questions, if anyone has any from the crowd. Unfortunately, we don't have a microphone, but just raise your hand, say who you are, what company you're with, and I'm sure the panelists will be happy to answer any questions. Anyone?
Crickets.
Yeah, I mean, I have a question, but it's not formulated. I was gonna ask, what would be a presentation? What would be an idea of an easier way to purchase tickets? Is maybe more like the movies, or something like that. Where why does it when you go to purchase a movie ticket, it never seems as arduous as when you get to Ticketmaster, and you're just like, this is more like ticket, you know, pain in my ass than like Ticketmaster.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like, I think iTunes in some way is very iconic of our generation. Like, you know, we came out of the Napster days, and now, you know, I want a song and I buy it and I'm downloading it already. I mean, I don't even think about the purchase because that fits, you know, that makes sense, and that's how it should be. So yeah, I mean, how does that make more sense in a ticketing process? That's a great question. I mean, Apple tried a program, you know, recently they tried the Passbook. Don't know that it's really caught on. I think Ticketmaster tried to integrate with that. I've never tried it, but that would be a very similar process.
I think it's, I mean, I guess, cause I'm not just ticket sales, but I guess when you originally put that question out there, to me it was more about just what else could we be doing differently, more just to engage with the product, or like with us with classical music. But for WNYC, like having like a program like a Stitcher or like an Instacast or something like that, where you have all of your podcasts in one place and it's just easy and you could quickly just kind of sort through what you want to listen to